Hello! Now listen to this short story and try to remember as much as you can, because there'll be a quiz on it at the end. The story is based on scripture found in Matthew chapter 14, Mark chapter 6, and John chapter 6, when Jesus walks on water. It was the end of a long day for Jesus and his disciples at the shore of the Sea of Galilee. An enormous crowd of thousands of people had gathered there, and so Jesus had talked to them all day, performing miracles too. Everyone was reluctant to leave. Jesus turned to his weary disciples. "It's going to take me a little while to convince everyone to leave," Jesus explained to them, as night began to draw in. "Take the boat and go ahead without me. I'll see all the people off, and then I want to go up to the mountainside for a while and spend some time praying on my own. I'll meet you later." The disciples must have wondered how Jesus was going to catch them up, but they did as they were told. They clambered aboard a little fishing boat and cast off toward the far shore, for Capernaum, where they were going to stay that night. As the men sailed away, Jesus turned back to the crowds and told them it was time to go home too. Then he went up a little way up a hillside. He stayed for quite a while, deep in thought, talking to God. By the time the disciples had reached the middle of the lake, they were in deep trouble. A sudden storm had picked up and strong winds were battering the boat. Hours passed and the night grew darker. The wind grew wilder and the waves grew higher. Several of the disciples were experienced sailors, but they couldn't stop the boat from being buffeted off course. The disciples were very frightened. As they sat huddled in the boat, desperately waiting for the light of dawn, they spotted a white glow in the darkness. It came nearer and grew bigger until it looked like a man walking on the water. "A ghost!" they cried, even more terrified than before. Then a voice reached them across the water. "Take heart, it's me, Jesus. Don't be afraid." The disciples looked at each other in astonishment. Peter bravely called out, "If it's really you, Lord, tell me to come to you." "Come," said the figure, holding out his hand. The other disciples held their breath as Peter stood up in the rocking boat and stepped out. They could hardly believe their eyes as they watched Peter walk across the waves closer and closer to Jesus. He kept his eyes fixed on Jesus all the time, but just as he had nearly reached him, he dared to look down. The moment he saw the churning depths beneath his feet, his belief faltered, his courage deserted him, and he plunged down into the foam. "Help me, Jesus!" Peter screamed in panic. Immediately, Jesus grabbed him and hauled him back. "Why did you suddenly have doubt?" he scolded gently, helping Peter back to the boat. As soon as Jesus had rejoined the disciples, the wind ceased and the waves died down. The disciples were amazed. "Truly, you are the Son of God," they gasped in wonder. So, as promised, 10 questions to check your understanding. Question 1. Where were Jesus and the disciples? And the answer, they were at the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Question 2. What did Jesus want to do after all the people had gone? And he wanted to go up to a mountainside and pray. Question 3. What type of boat did the disciples get into? And they got into a little fishing boat. Question 4. Where were Jesus and the disciples going to stay that night? And they were heading for Capernaum. Question 5. What caused the boat to go off course? And that was a storm. Question 6. What did the disciples see in the darkness? And they saw a white glow. Question 7. At first, what did they think was coming towards them on the waves? And initially, they thought it was a ghost. Question 8. Why did Peter suddenly fall into the sea? And he fell because he looked down and his belief faltered. Question 9. What happened as soon as Jesus reached the boat with Peter? And it was at that point that the storm died down. And question 10. After witnessing these extraordinary events, what did the disciples decide about Jesus? And after this, they knew that truly he was the Son of God. And if you want to read the original story in the scriptures, don't look in Luke. It's not there. Try Matthew 14, Mark 6, or John 6, whichever's your favourite.